Ladies and gentlemen, here it is. The most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Here's our wonderful voice.
God, I love the station.
Good morning, wherever you may be around the globe, in the chat room, on another planet, or on the other side. This is The Last Frequency. I'm Mike Vara, and I do welcome all of you, wherever it is you may be. And this broadcast is coming at you live from the capital city, Columbia, South Carolina, located on the east coast of the United States. And it is Sunday night, and we're live on the Vara network, also live on YouTube. You can find us on the Paranormal Radio Network or the Paranormal Radio app, and we're all over the place there. And archives are on a whole bunch of places. And you know what? You can find out where by going to the website lastfrequency.com. There's a tab at the top that says Ways to Listen. But I just, this, I got a quiet fan. So it's quiet, but it's not really that quiet. So, anyways, I got a really good guest tonight. Glenn Steckling will be joining me this evening, and he is going to talk about, UFOs, the Adamski ordeal, the whole 9 yards. We'll get into tonight, and I'm just trying to find my. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So, anyways, he is the director and copyright holder of the 60-year-old George Adamski Foundation, and so he's been on the show before, and he's going to come on again tonight, and we're going to talk some more about all that good stuff. And so, by the way, if you want to help out the network and the show, there's a way of doing that. I bet you couldn't wait for me to tell you that too, right? Go over to lastfrequency.com. There's a donate button over there. Every little bit helps. There's also a shop, purchase. I'm about to revamp that whole thing too, that shop. The whole shop is about to get revamped. And so I don't know if there's anything in there that might interest you. I've got, I'm about to start putting some uncensored merchandise in there too, but I just haven't got around to it yet. And maybe on break I might go and try to cut that fan off. It's not in arm's reach right now. It's clear across the way here. But so I got some news, some discovery, I guess you could say, and some other things. And of course, as always on YouTube, we keep it a little more mellow because the YouTube gods get angry if you get into anything too serious. So and not that UFOs, I mean, of course that's serious, but it doesn't. So for some reason that doesn't get their, put them in a knot, shall we say. So a former U.S. Air Force captain has broken his silence on a UFO attack and blasted a government lie over a craft that left guards screaming. Screaming. I screamed when I saw the big one too, but I screamed in joy, not in fear. Robert Sellis headed a Malmstom base in Montana in 1967 when a guard came towards him and claimed strange lights were heading their way. Mr. Selsa revealed 10 nuclear missiles were hidden in the subterranean bunker when the reddish-orange lights were pulsating. He said they were hovering motionless and without sound, and there was a solid object within the light that was oval-shaped. And Mr. Salas didn't believe the guard, and, well, he joked. What, like UFOs? And, well, the guard replied, well, they're not airplanes, sir. So they were UFOs. And, sightings, how do you investigate UFOs anyways? I'm going to have to, there's a lot of people out there say, well, we investigate. I mean, there's only so much you could do. These things are gone. I mean, it's not like you could track them down, knock at the door, and say, hey, your UFO was seen at such and such a place. But I don't know. I'm glad somebody's taking interest. And I still wonder why it's now coming out that, oh, yeah, it's all true. It's all true when they lied for so long. Why now? Watch out for that fake alien invasion. Mexican mayor reveals discovery of alleged goblin remains. Oh, boy. The so-called goblin was found during construction work and has since been paraded on camera by the mayor himself. This kind of reminds me of that Greer thing. He said he found the alien, and some were saying it was, I don't know, it did look a little weird, though. And some were saying, it was a baby or a fetus skeleton. I don't know about that. But then I just don't know about that. But back to this. According to Francisco Mayro Flores, who presides over Santa Maria Regla, Mexico, the cryptozoological creature was found during construction work at a nearby warehouse. Widely circulated footage shows him presenting the find in a white cardboard box. Samples have already been taken to determine a scientific explanation. Flores himself seems to be certain that the remains of those of either a goblin or some kind of mythological Mesoamerican being that is capable of shape-shifting. We got all that out of a corpse, skeleton, something. I don't know. All right, so goblins. Excuse me. Goblins. I don't know. Have we ever touched on goblins before? I don't know if we've... Fairies, done fairies, all that stuff. Goblins, I don't think we've done goblins. We even did a little bit on gnomes, but not goblins. How thick is the crust of Mars? This question is what a recent study published by the Geophysical Research Letters attempted to answer, as it reported on data from a magnitude 4.7 Mars quake recorded in May 2022 by NASA's InSight lander, which remains the largest quake ever recorded on another planetary body. As it turns out, the data help provide estimates of Mars' global crustal thickness, along with a unique discovery regarding the crust in the northern and southern hemispheres, and how the interior of Mars produces its heat. See? I mean, look, I think Mars is, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not in NASA. I can't tell you, I'm not behind the scenes, but it would seem to me like I have a feeling that Mars and even the moon are capable of holding, life to some degree. I mean, they both have atmospheres, and there's how long we've been told, there's no atmosphere on the moon. Yes, there is. So anyways, from this quake, the largest quake recorded during the entire InSight mission, They said they observed surface waves that circled Mars up to 3 times. So 3 times. It's pretty strong. And Mars is coming back alive. You know, it's about to perk back up. That'd be nice. We could use neighbors. Neighbors are always nice. I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I'll have Glenn Steckling with me. He is, again, the director and copyright holder of the 60-year-old George Adamski Foundation. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Folks, you're listening to The Last Frequency. I'm Mike Vara. Don't go away. We've got about, 2 hours of this to go. And don't forget, go on over to the website and become a member. Be informed. Inform others. It's free. The archives are free. It's all there for you. Go check it out.
Columbia.
Excellent.
Number 1 means you're always on top. Your number 1 radio.
You're listening to the VARA Network. Hey, frequencies of all walks of life. Keep up with all things TLF radio by joining our mailing list. Go to the bottom of the homepage and fill in the form. You'll get everything from guest info and show info and other important station-related information. So sign up now.
Crazy ass bumper stickers and more.
What?
You heard me. Crazy ass bumper stickers and more.
What?
Crazy ass bumper stickers and more.
What?
For all your bumper sticker needs, just click on the Crazy Ass Bumper Stickers banner located at the foot of my website, www.lastfrequency.com. That's Crazy Ass Bumper Stickers and more.
You're making me crazy.
I want to talk to you about something very important for a moment here, folks. That is clean drinking water. Yeah, you can survive without it for about 3 days. How do you know yours is even pure? You don't, but I'll tell you what is. This is the ultimate water filtration solution. It's called Alexa Pure Pro. It is a groundbreaking gravity-fed water filtration system that outperforms all the others for less. I personally stand behind the Alexa Pure Pro water filtration system because I use it.
This is the last frequency.
You are the resistance.
Welcome to the night. From the Midlands of South Carolina, you're listening to The Last Frequency with your host, Mike Vara. To get questions directly to Mike Vara, you can call in or message Mike on our website, www.lastfrequency.com. Now, here is Mike Vara.
are. This is the last frequency, broadcasting live from the VARA network and on YouTube. Now, I know what I'm kind of curious is if tonight, if you're getting me in just one speaker and not the other. It's happened on Rumble, and I don't know if it's just I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I don't know. Haven't really had a chance to get into it too deeply, but I like that. It's a nice little tune, little beat, really good. Anyways, I haven't had too much of a chance to get into it, but I noticed, I listened back to one of the shows on Rumble, and a listener tried to warn me about it too, but when in my ears, I'm hearing both. Everything's coming in good. All my meters are showing everything good. So, that doesn't mean nothing, apparently. So, my guest, Glenn Steckling, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and I'm going to bring him on. He is waiting, as they say, in the green room. He's going to be with us and should be on video tonight. Glenn Steckling, the director and copyright holder of the 60-year-old George Adamski Foundation, one of the oldest enduring UFO organizations, discusses his family's extensive history with the UFO field and their association with George Adamski. This includes, so much. And, I'm just going to bring him on. This is a lot regarding the UFO history, and certainly going to talk about some of the agendas and misinformation in the UFO field, and ufology, call it what you will. And so let me go ahead and try to bring my guest on. Let's see here. Now, I just had it set. Oh, yeah, I do have it set. Okay. Here we go.
This Glenn.
Good evening, Glenn. How are you tonight?
Good. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing just fine. It's a pleasure to have you. I thank you for taking time out to be here.
Oh, no worries. It's always a great pleasure to do your show and talk to your listeners.
Well, thank you so much. So, first off, again, thank you so much. And just maybe a little bit of background is where I like to always start with these things. For those who might not know, a little bit of background on yourself and how you got going in all this. And,
Well, my family was involved for over 50 years in this field, and we were personal co-workers and friends of George Adamski. We witnessed some of his sightings with him. He introduced us to some of his space contacts. And after Mr. Adamski passed away, we became the eventual inheritors of all his materials, films, photographs, copyrights, and all materials and estate, and continued to operate the George Adamski Foundation as I do until the current time. And so my father was responsible for taking, by invitation, to NASA Goddard Space Flight Center with a panel of 22 scientists, and a few months thereafter by invitation of Colonel Freeman and his staff to the Pentagon, and eventually, after his book came out, the second book, Alien Bases on the Moon, to the British House of Lords by Lord Clancarty to address the Select Committee. And so my father and mother traveled the world on their spare time when they had vacation or time off, and represented this material in all the continents to a great interest on Japanese national television in 1977, and in Australia and the universities and what have you, Europe. And some of these events I also accompanied them or worked directly with my father during the events until he passed away in 1991, and then I became sole responsible for the foundation itself. So over the many years, I've had both, as a very young age, the great honor of having these sightings, and which have lasted all the way up to present time to some degree or another. And also in my professional career, I'm a retired airline pilot now, and my colleagues have contacted me over period of time and let me know when they have sightings as well. A good friend of mine was traveling from the eastern seaboard down to Florida along the Atlantic routes, and they saw 5 of these ships in formation come up on their right side and switch positions with each other and accompany them for 20 minutes. And then we've had the same group of people, airline pilots from 5 different airlines, witness UFOs over the central United States and over the Pacific, from Japan to Hawaii and Hawaii to the mainland. So there is I would say, a significant degree of activity, and we try to dial into it as much as possible.
No, I wonder why. There's I just had a guest on not long ago who was, that's kind of his thing, is these crafts around, airplanes, helicopters, that kind of thing. And why are they so attracted to these things? And I mean, what is the purpose? I mean, they got to know they're being seen, right?
Well, perhaps that is the purpose, to be seen.
Yeah.
I would say that has always been a significant one of the many purposes involved with their visitations and their interactions with us. And to be seen is the primary step to start the process of first recognition, and then in questioning, why are they here, and what have you. So I have to disagree with the Israeli scientist who retired, who came out a few years ago and said that they're here, but they are remaining in hiding. And when you look historically, since biblical times and earlier, there are thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of accounts and sightings and records. And so if they're hiding, they're not worried about hiding too well, because they make themselves more than plainly visible when necessary.
That's absolutely true. They, if that's hiding, I'd like to know what being out in the open looks like. Because
that's right. Just think in '52 when they flew over formation over the Capitol building and the military scrambled their jets, the F-86s and Shooting Stars, to chase them. It's front page photograph on the national newspaper. '54 over London in formation in Paris. November of '54, photographed in multitude formations over Rome and the Vatican. So yes, they have always been with us, and hiding is not what they're doing. They're making themselves well known and visible.
Oh, absolutely. And obviously the military has come out, even the government, I suppose, has come out and said that they're starting to admit that these things are real, and I just can't get my mind around why they've lied so long, and now here they are telling us, oh yeah, these things are real.
Well, I think it's a twofold. Yes, they have denied. The process was originally put together. General Twining was responsible for the recovery and the suppression of the Roswell incident and the recovered crafts that ended up in Dayton, Ohio at Wright Pat, and a couple of the bodies at Walter Reed and Bethesda Naval Hospital. And he consulted with President Truman at that time whether they should tell the public, and it was determined by the Pentagon that they were not going to. And so they went into phase one, which phase one was denial, intimidation, and excuses as much as they could come up with. Phase two was initiated after 1961 because they found out that these crafts were landing worldwide, and the people inside were having interactions with our own people, so they are having a harder and harder time to deny it. So they worked into phase two, which was to scare the population into not being willing to approach or interact with these craft and these extraterrestrials. This was done by a multitudes of means. One of them was, of course, through the media outlets and movie outlets that they screened. The military had a office across the street from the major studios. If you read the book Hollywood versus the Flying Saucer and Silver Screen Saucers, they were responsible for reviewing any science fiction script that was going to be considered for production or release. And so we've been getting a twofold narrative of denial and fear. Fear is the greatest psychological tool to use against people because we are so susceptible to it and uncertain of ourselves. And now whatever they admit to, they don't. I mean, if you follow the history, there was a huge push in the late 50s, early 60s. Barry Goldwater, Senator General Goldwater, attempted to get information. He was denied. The Speaker of the House, McCormick, was denied. A whole list of congressmen and other officials approached the Air Force and the CIA, who was responsible for the secrecy behind this subject, and they were denied. And so there was a great push until 68, the hearings with Professor McDonald, and that was not going to come out, and it's not going to come out now. Disclosure is nothing more than a fantasy. They will feed you whatever information they wish you to know or not to know. And as you well know, any information that comes out is carefully screened. Most of it is redacted, blacked out. And so, you know, the naval sightings in 2004 of the fighters that filmed these things, I mean, it's 20 years later now, and you still haven't got yourself a definitive answer, and you never will get one.
No, I know, and you know, and what's the information that does get out? A lot of it is misinformation that they put out there. I mean, it's just I wanted to talk to you about that briefly. I mean, what's your thoughts on the whole field right now? Do you feel it's become a circus or what?
Yes, it has. As I say, I'm finishing up on my new book here now. You know, the UFO enigma, Can Truth Prevail, and hopefully have it to the printer in the next few months. But yes, the UFO subject, after having spent more than half a century in there, it is a circus. It is 95% hogwash. You are the public, I'm sad to say, is being abused for their lack of knowledge, or if you want to use a word, ignorance in this field. And there are many unscrupulous personalities that love to play the science fiction fantasy game and come up with all kinds of nonsense in order to get you to buy books or to attend conferences, you know, at ridiculous prices, and to listen to the same thing over and over again. And so, in my opinion, it is a terribly abused and misused field because nobody demands tangible proof from anybody. The accusation is sufficient enough. And I have become much more straightforward in my public speaking about this. And I will say right now on the air, ladies and gentlemen, you're being played for suckers. There are no avatars coming to visit you that are blue. There are no amphibians, reptiles. There are no crayfish. And there are no Sasquatches that are flying spaceships, no lobsters crawling out of the ocean and building spaceships and microcomputers. You are being played. And that's because in the absence of true information, it opens the doors to all the false information and misinformation, because when you don't know, then you're left grasping at straws. And this is a very, in my view, a very despicable abuse of a very important subject, a subject whose interactions can change the course of our civilization and help us to walk away from very uncertain times and destructiveness, which we are all too willing to embrace.
Yeah, well said. That being said, when it comes to Sasquatch, I know it's probably not your thing, but it wasn't mine either. But do you think there's any truth to that at all?
I don't deny the fact that there are biological species that have yet to be discovered. In fact, it doesn't take much of a rocket scientist to go out and find that we discover new species in the ocean, on the land, in the jungles, all the time. And so whether this is a primate or in my field, I believe it is a primate remnant of earlier times, but it has nothing to do with flying saucers. It has nothing to do with extraterrestrials, and that association is falsely made in order to exploit the mystery factor and give you programmings that continue to not answer any questions, but basically, once again, heighten the uncertainty and the fear factor. And all you have to do is examine these programs a little bit. You know, you watch them, they're out there supposedly tracking down Sasquatch, and they're running through the woods after this beast, and nobody is armed, and nobody has any type of protection. And you think to yourself, come on now, I mean, would you do that? Would you go into an unknown area without providing a secure environment for yourself and your film crew and everybody else? And so
absolutely not. I won't go out in the driveway without something.
Yeah, it's getting bad. I'm telling you, not getting any better, that's for sure. But the idea is that Sasquatch isn't any different than any other biological species, whether it's Siberian tigers or mountain gorillas or whatever. They are. I think they exist, but once again, not in the UFO arena. That is totally false. Just like cattle mutilations have nothing to do with extraterrestrials.
I was just going to ask you about those cattle mutilations.
Well, once again, people don't think logically here. First of all, why would you take cows only? You're not interested in horses, sheep, pigs, any other species is walking around.
They like beef.
Yeah, well, if they like ribeye steak, I can't blame them there. But the idea is that I examined it closely, and my father was on the air in '67, and they asked him about that as well, and because that was kind of the beginning of that enigma, and he said it has nothing to do with that. And the producer knew a rancher in Colorado. They called up, and he said, it's got nothing to do with extraterrestrials. I got a bunch of people in lab coats and other stuff running around here. We've got biological laboratories not very far away. They are constantly in these laboratories experimenting with viruses and bacteria. We just got through with COVID. If that isn't a living example, I don't know what is. And so we test these particular things on livestock. Some of it's captured livestock, some of it's free-range livestock, and in order to determine the results of our own experimentation. When you find reports of gruesomeness and hideous types of activity, I guarantee you 99.9% of the time we're behind it and nobody else. Nobody is 4,000 years ahead of us in space technology, which it takes to travel between solar systems, and comes here to have fun with your cows. I mean, come on, people, start using some logical thought. I mean.
So then, that being the case, okay, but then why? I mean, why wouldn't they these lab coats? Why wouldn't they, purchase their own cattle just to keep the noise down? I mean, because it's kind of foolish the way they do it. They massacre them and then they leave them there as evidence.
Doesn't it serve a twofold process? Not only do they get to have their experimentation, but they get to redirect and to falsely inject a tangent suspicion into the field that they are working so hard to deny anyhow. So actually it solves a multi-purpose for them. And we also know scientifically that while we experiment on species in captivity, and don't you ever believe that we don't use it on people too, that we also look to widen the parameters and to see what the results are in non-captive conditions as well. I mean, we do that with people. Remember how they poisoned the water system on the East Coast in the late 60s and experimented? The CIA got caught with that, experimenting with certain compounds. And so we have no limit to the perversity of the mind and what we are willing to do to our own fellow man, which is as contrary to the Christian ethic as you can possibly get.
And, and it's not like I have a problem with that description, because it's it makes sense. I mean, when it comes down to it, I thought that too. It's like, okay, I can see maybe the first time they come here to say, hey, look at this, let's check it out, and maybe they experiment on one cow. But I don't see why they would need to come for, how many decades and just continue to slaughter cows. And then you're not even taking the good parts. You're just taking,
right. 50,000 cows. How many cows do you have to look at before you realize you got cows? And the other part of this,
right.
The other part of this equation is we are so totally ignorant at the level of their technology. They can sit in their ship orbiting this planet, and with their instrumentation, they can totally record and evaluate you down to your subatomic structure. They can read your mind. They can record our conversations. They can watch us through high-powered magnifying instruments. They know everything about us, inside and out, without having to leave the security and the uncertainty of their own comfortable spaceships. Why would you come down here and expose yourself unnecessarily to the most unpredictable and hostile species we have proven ourselves to be?
Yeah, well, that we are. I mean, looking on the outside in, you got to think, what is wrong with these people? It's like we're like hamsters in a cage. We'll eat our own.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. So,
well, because the extraterrestrial contact and visitations would change our entire modus operandi. We would find ourselves in a situation where energy is free, so you are no longer a suspect to geopolitical manipulations of the oil. You would find yourself in a situation where there is greater cooperation and understanding for peaceful coexistence. This will disarm the military-industrial complex, which is so busy selling arms all over the world. Well, you really don't expect somebody to sell arms and the person who buys it not to use it. So they have to have armed conflicts in order to continue to make and produce the weapons that we base our entire economic structure on. And so we see them as a threat to our way of doing things. And even if it's a better way of doing things, we don't want it. As an example, when we were in Mexico in the late 60s, early 70s, the Mexican military police came within a week of us arriving, and the commandant, my father, invited him in. He was always very cordial, said, sure, come on in, let's talk. And then in the meantime, 2 truckloads worth of military personnel went all over our ranch with magnetometers and all kinds of instruments to scan the ground and the buildings and everything. My father looked outside there and he started laughing. He says, this makes me very happy, because obviously you wouldn't be bothering to do this if you didn't think there was something to find. And so he looked the commandant straight into the eyes and said, don't worry, if I had a spaceship, I wouldn't be here. I would have left this place a long time ago. So the commandant laughed, and probably thinking he was inclined to think the same way, but he pointed to one of the Adamski photos, one of the ones that were hanging on the wall, all photos that have been authenticated, and he said, we received a shortened dossier from the Pentagon on you and your activities, and we know all about you. He says, we know all about this subject, and he said this very plainly. We know they are here. We know where they come from. We know they are good for us, but we don't want them. And my father said, well, why don't you want something that's good for you? He says, because it will change the religious and economical way of how we conduct our business and lives.
It'll change the control.
Yeah, it changes control. And so they eventually packed up and off they went, even though we were aware of their surveillance occasionally, and we went on about our business. And so
when you're a bully, you don't want a bigger bully in your yard, right? Because now you're not in charge no more. He'll kick your butt. So And that's basically what it is. Yeah.
Well, remember in the 60s, I think it was 67, when they were the reports from Montana where the UFO was hanging over the military base, and all 10 nuclear ICBMs went offline, totally shut them down. And then in '64, they filmed a launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base out here in California, and as the missile was headed out towards the Pacific, they filmed a UFO flying parallel to it, shooting the warhead with beams, and the missile, when it came down, was totally neutralized. So I think to some degree we are reminded that no matter how big an ego we have and how dangerous we are to each other, that there are always others who are much more advanced and much more intelligent than we are at this particular phase of our existence.
And you wonder why they hang around. What is their? I mean, is it like just a good TV show, or I mean, what? Why have any after all this time? I mean, they've been here for God knows how long, since the beginning maybe. And so why are they still interested in us?
Well, I think they see themselves in us. I mean, we are basically a capsule of their earlier expression. So if for somebody to be 4,000 years ahead of us, they can look back at us and they can see how they once were and how they once thought, and they can see that the steps that they took to make their advancements without destroying themselves. And so they see that parallel in our own evolution, and thereby they come to us to try to help us recognize what our potential is and what we should be doing. It's not any different than if you have a family member and that family member needs an intervention or has problem with substance abuse or alcoholism. You continue to show concern for that person no matter what the duration of time is between the time that you talked to them last. I was on a program a week ago in which one of the former guests was talking about that they liked they talked to Gene Roddenberry, and he said, well, what do you think is the emphasis of the show? And as it turns out, the emphasis was that we go places in order to make contact and help other civilizations. Well, why do we find that so strange that somebody would reverse that very thing and do that for us?
Yeah. Well, I wonder if every species, I wonder what the percentage is of how many get to their stage without destroying themselves, though. Because, I can't see them, getting where they are, being anything like us. We just don't grow up.
Well, think about this. Think about our ancient sages, whether it's Moses or Buddha or Jesus or any of these people. What did they teach? They taught natural principle of the very basics. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, to love one another. Blessed are the peacekeepers, and so on. And as you sow, so shall you reap, and so on and so forth. These principles are not just unique to this planet. These principles exist throughout the cosmos. And so while we give nothing but lip service to our religious beliefs and claim that, oh, we're this and we're that, and how pious we are and how advanced we are, we don't put any of that hardly to practice. Where in their case, they not only put it to practice, they live it. And that is the huge difference between them and us.
Yeah, it is. Now, what's your take on the whole abduction thing? I get the cows, but what about the people?
Well, I dedicated an entire chapter in my new book to what we call the illusion of abductions. And basically, it's the illusion of alien abductions. We have done, and we have experimented on our own people. We have used them into forced labor. We have done all kinds. I mean, look at our history, what we have done to one another over just the last 2,000 years. But They do not come here, like I say, to use you, abuse you. The numbers are very clear and plain. Out of our population, over 120 million of the population of the United States alone suffers from psychological disorders. Another 40 to 60 million suffer from stress and sleep deprivation. The results of sleep deprivation is a feeling at night when you're trying to sleep that you are hovering above your bed and tingling or electrical sensations running through your body. There is a multitude of mental indications of what we ourselves are going through, and it has nothing to do with aliens. Like I told you before, they can sit up there in the comfort of their ships and register you down to your subatomic level. They never have to come down here and do anything. And so I think that we ourselves have propagated some abductions in order to once again play into that narrative. If the narrative is to make the people fearful of any type of interaction or contact, if you're starting with animals, the next logical step is to go then to people in order to try to force that issue. And I think while many people have had sensations, I think that we have a great false accusation that what the source of that is. And we also have an unscrupulous population that are willing to exploit psychotherapy-wise this abduction scenario, in which one of the lead therapists once said, well, people are susceptible to whatever you put into their minds, whether under hypnosis or chemical reduction or what have you. And so it's as simple as saying what the difference between what happened to you last Tuesday or what happened to you when you were abducted last Tuesday. You have thereby planted the implication through the very process of going through the therapy session. And so I think that we are too easily succumb to blame everybody and anybody else. If we don't feel good, it's the aliens' problem. If something bad happens to us, it's the alien thing. If something goes on that we don't understand, I remember I once talked to a young lady who said, well, the aliens were invisible in her office and they were throwing pencils and erasers and stuff at her and all this other stuff, which is nothing more than a cry for some psychological attention there. That's victimization is what they call that. But the idea here is that it has become an easy scapegoat, and people don't want to face their own selves.
Yeah, for 4,000, however light years they come, and just to throw erasers and pencils at somebody, I don't see that happening at all. Boy, oh boy, it's just a mystery. That's all I can say. It's a mystery, and there's no doubt with the abduction situation that I know that the government, powers that be, call them who you will, have the technology to put thoughts in your mind and remove memories from your mind. They have that technology now.
Absolutely, they've had it for a long time. And in fact, they conducted experiments from satellites where they broadcast the frequency of a certain color over a swath of topography as the satellite orbits, and they have found out that the people react unifiedly to certain color frequencies. And so, and I think it's more attuned to the frequency itself than the color that's representative of it. But it shows you that people, they found out, find themselves highly agitated, and they don't know why. And all of a sudden, they become aggressive based on that agitation. And so, we have discovered by the use of microwave beams and energies, we have built our own defense vehicles and hardware that if it's broadcast at people, they lose their track of time, they lose their train of thought. People haven't the slightest clue at all the things that we have developed ourselves. Some of it we have bastardized and manipulated from reverse technology that we have recovered from craft, and then reused it and reinvented it. That's why the space people are so cautious about what they give us, because the first thing our inclination is to turn things into weapons.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a prison, you know. They'll take a toothbrush and make it into a shank.
That's right. And so consequently, we have to take a much more rationalized view of things. Basically, we have to help educate ourselves and each other so that we will learn to discard that which is untrue and unreal, and to swipe away the debris until we find the nuggets or the gems of truth that lie buried within. And you have to do this in everything we do in life, and especially in this subject where it is so easy to mislead.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you something else. Of all the quote-unquote abductees that I have interviewed, most of them anyways, if not all, but I think just most, I'll say, have reported seeing not only extraterrestrial beings on the craft, but seeing humans on the craft as well, like in military outfits. And I always thought, I says, well, how do you know it's not the military-industrial complex themselves or some alphabet agency that's actually abducting you and making you think that you were being abducted by aliens? And, most of them will swear up and down that, I know what happened, and then there's others who say, well, I don't know. And
that's true. And also remember that when something is, when a thought is suggested or implanted in you under hypnosis, you will swear up and down that the circumstances and the events that are subjected to your brain actually occurred. So we have to say to people that it's not that they're outright not telling the truth, because to them, in their perception, they firmly believe that something happened to them. Whether they have associated it to the correct source, that becomes an entirely different question.
Yeah, and then there's the whole implant thing. And I know Dr. Roger Lear used to, before he passed away, he was big into that. And, he had video where they try to get these things and they would move. That could very well be our technology too, then.
Absolutely. When you think about this, tracking devices is something that our own powers that be love to use. Right now, they have successfully marketed to the most of the world the best tracking and listening device that you can possibly conceive, and that's called your cell phone.
I agree.
We've become slaves to it. We cannot. People can't pull up to a four-way stop for 10 seconds without reaching for their phone.
You're so right. Oh, my God, yes. Yeah.
And so consequently, we have given them, due to our own addictions, we have given away our individuality and our freedoms very easily. And so... But as far as technology is concerned, there is not a scientist that won't tell you that the technology you see today, it was developed at least 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it has taken this long, while they have been busy using it, it has taken this long to drift down into the public sector in whatever format they choose to detune it to.
Oh, yeah, and we are so easily manipulated. All they have to do is they create these toys to track us, and they make them, they say, well, this is for you. It's a cell phone. Now you can take your phone everywhere you go. And it's like, oh, yay. And now they don't even need to get warrants to listen to you. They just tune right in.
That's right. They can do it video-wise, tune in, what have you, and they never needed warrants to. If they want to surveil you, a warrant was nothing but a superficial fantasy that was as if when they want to listen to you. I mean, look, Fort Huachuca down there in Arizona has one of the largest listening facilities in the world, and they listen in on drug dealers and everybody else that they choose to listen on, and there's not a warrant for every single circumstances. Come on, and that simply is not logistically or feasible.
Yeah, I miss the old days of the landlines. I mean, real landlines, not the cable networks version of a landline. When the cable goes out, your phone goes out too. I miss that. I miss not being bothered every 2 seconds while I'm away from the desk or away from home even. But, but you're right. I mean, I see people walking in the doors. I mean, they cross streets looking at their phone, and I'm thinking, how do they do that? How does this guy even know where he's going? They are so addicted to it, and I don't know. I think one of my guests says we're going to end up devolving or evolving into with our necks bent down and hunched over because that's what people do all the time now.
Well, it's easy to predict negativity, whether it's to prophesize destruction or Armageddon and all these other things. I have to remember that the word Armageddon doesn't stand for total destruction. It stands for the word change. That is basically the translation of it. And so, I can't tell you how many times over the last 40 years I've heard disclosure is right around the corner and it's all going to be there. And then the next one is, well, the space people are going to come and they're going to change our ways for us, which is absolutely false. They will never do that. They are here to help us, but they are not here to do it for us. That has to be our own actions, because you do not learn from an experience unless you yourself have gone through it. And you do that with your children. You tell them the stove's hot and don't touch it, and eventually they touch it, burn themselves, and that becomes the litmus test that they won't do it themselves to themselves again.
Yeah.
And so they are coming to help us. There is no what we would call overseeing force. The New Age industry is telling you, the age of Aquarius or the age of this or that is coming, and this overwhelming force will make everybody into something better. And that, of course, is a complete fantasy, because we are all at different stages of development, and nature does not force that upon you which you are not ready to recognize. And so by the very nature of the claim that you will be risen to a new height of acknowledgement and intellect has to come from yourself. It does not come from some outside force. And so there are once again so many misconceptions that are played upon the people. They run to areas where they think that there are so-called vortexes, and they wear their crystals, and they don't understand that the crystal is a neutral device. It's nothing more than a magnifying glass. It is not the source of energy. You are the source of energy, and your energy can therefore be broadcast through that magnifying glass, just like if you held a magnifying glass above, over your desk. It does nothing in comparison that if you go outside and you shine the sun through there, then you can light anything below there on fire. It's the energy and the power of the soul of the person that creates that advancement, that response, and not the crystal itself. But people don't want to hear that.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I thought crystals, I've heard anyways that they're good for, they hold memory. Like if we could plug those things into a computer and I don't know, dissect them, that they would have, tons and tons and tons of history on them.
Aren't you a better source of memory than an innate object like a rock?
Yeah, I would hope so.
You yourself are.
Yeah.
You yourself are supposed to be the master of your own being, and you're supposed to understand that you come from the creative source of all things. And so why would the rock have more memory than you yourself when you are supposed to be the master of everything of your domain? That means over the rocks too.
Well, yeah, again, I would hope so. I just, people do a whole I haven't done a crystal skull show in, I don't know, probably 12 years. I don't have a huge interest in it. I don't think it's as important as some people do. But yeah, I mean, some people really put a lot of creativeness thinking, I guess you could say, into these crystals and crystal skulls. Like there's some kind of key to the universe.
Well, could it be that basically everything in life is based upon frequency and electricity? These are the two binders of all creation. And if something is embedded with a frequency, you still need to have the receiver in order to translate that frequency. So let's say that somebody has, advanced technology-wise, embedded a frequency into the crystal skull. It is innate until you yourself approach it or touch it or what have you. This then, you become the energy source in order to absorb that frequency, and then you are the translator of what that frequency is. Otherwise, it's just a crystal skull that sits there like any other rock. It can't move itself, it can't transport itself through the air or anything else. And so, you know, there's a possibility that you it is a broadcast availability, and you are the receiver, and thereby you may receive some impressions. I personally think that it does nothing more than activate a dormant part of ourselves, in which opens up the door, and then we realize things that we carried with us already for always.
Yeah, I mean, that's good too, and it still makes it a good tool, even if it's like a placebo. If you think it's working and then it works, well, then it was all good, right? So you pick up this crystal and it makes you think of whatever, and it works, well, then it works for you, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, well, Glenn, hang on with me for a few minutes. I want to take a break here, and then we'll come back, and you and I will finish up. We've got a little bit longer to go. So, folks, you're listening to The Last Frequency. I'm Mike Vara. I have guest Glenn Steckling with me. If you got any questions, you could get those to me through the portal on the website at lastfrequency.com. Or you could pop them in the YouTube chat, and I'll try to get them there. Or you can even call 803-392-4566 when I return. Once again, Last Frequency on the VARA network. We'll be right back.
Carolina Radio.
Columbia.
Excellent, excellent.
Number one means you're always on top. Your number one radio.
You're listening to the VARA Network. Hey, frequencies of all walks of life. Keep up with all things TLF radio by joining our mailing list. Go to the bottom of the homepage and fill in the form. You'll get everything from guest info and show info and other important station-related information. So sign up now.
Crazy ass bumper stickers and more.
What?
You heard me. Crazy ass bumper stickers and more.
What?
Crazy ass bumper stickers and more.
What?
For all your bumper sticker needs, just click on the Crazy Ass Bumper Stickers banner located at the foot of my website, www.lastfrequency.com. That's Crazy Ass Bumper Stickers and more.
You're making me crazy.
I want to talk to you about something very important for a moment here, folks. That is clean drinking water. Yeah, you can survive without it for about 3 days. How do you know yours is even pure? You don't, but I'll tell you what is. This is the ultimate water filtration solution. It's called Alexa Pure Pro. It is a groundbreaking gravity-fed water filtration system that outperforms all the others for less. I personally stand behind the Alexa Pure Pro water filtration system because I use it.
This is the last frequency.
You are the Resistance.
Welcome to the night. From the Midlands of South Carolina, you're listening to The Last Frequency with your host, Mike Vara. To get questions directly to Mike Vara, you can call in or message Mike on our website, www.lastfrequency.com. Now, here is Mike Vara.
Good evening to you all, wherever you're listening from. This is The Last Frequency. I am Mike Vara. My guest, he is Glenn Steckling, and very interesting guest. I like to bring him back periodically and catch up on all of this. I mean, he's got a realistic outlook on all of this, not the blue chickens are coming to, take us away. Keeping a more realistic approach on this topic, and I could appreciate that big time. And I'm sure the YouTube gods don't mind that either. So, if you want to help out, you can, and that is this network, this show. I don't charge for the archives. I don't charge for any of that at this time. And don't plan on it really anytime soon. And so to avoid ever having to do that, just a simple donation here or there certainly helps. Take the burden off me. I do finance all this myself. And it may not seem like much, believe me, you nickel and dime yourself like crazy. But I'm not complaining, I'm just explaining. And hey, the website is lastfrequency.com. Go on over, become a member, be informed, inform others. It's Saturdays at midnight for Uncensored, which would be Sunday morning, really. Sunday nights, 9 p.m. I do on YouTube and, of course, the station. And Monday nights at 9 p.m., I am on the station and on Rumble. So we kind of split it up everywhere. Eventually, I'm going to get set up where I'm going to be doing it on all of them, but at the same time, but not right now. So let's get back to it. Again, any questions, just try to get them to the portal if you can. If not, you can try through the YouTube chat. And if I happen to be looking at it, I will get it, I promise. So, Glenn, we are back. And the moon, a lot of moon anomalies. What do you know about that? I was reading about, and I've had guests that have told me so many different things. Everything from bases to towers, and even tubal structures. What do you know about all that?
Well, I happen to be quite well versed on the moon, and the fact that we have good information, but we have not updated that information, and so therefore we continue to operate under assumptions that are not accurate. First of all, we have dictated to the people that the moon is 1/6 gravity, and we are using the Newtonian formula for that. But we have discovered that the Newtonian formula already has a 15% error in it. And so that's inaccurate. So basically, if you can look and see this, that I'll hold up to the camera, it is the lunar gravitational formula, which is standardized. And you will see by plugging the numbers, the accurate numbers into it, due to the what we call the L1, the neutral gravity point of the moon. If it was 1/6 gravity, that means that the L1 would be at 23,900 miles from the lunar surface. But we know for a fact, and it has been printed often enough, and has to be calculated correctly for our lunar shots, that the actual L1 is at 44,000 miles. The gravitational computation is calculated exponentially. So at 44,000 miles, that means that the moon's surface has a gravitational field of 64% of that of Earth. And we saw that demonstrated with astronaut Young with a full pack, a spacesuit and everything, of which he would weigh about 360 pounds on the Earth. And if we use the 1/6 calculation, he would weigh only 60 pounds on the moon. So when he did his historic up and down jump like a basketball player, he could jump less than 2 feet high. We have our own talented athletes who can jump higher than that on the basketball field. And so we're showing that the moon has a higher gravitational field, and it also has a magnetic field. But here's where it becomes interesting. The moon is also admitted to having a light atmosphere. And that atmosphere equates to something else as well. Atmosphere means that there is a motion across the planetary surface, or in this case, the satellite surface of the moon, which means that this air moves from high to low like it does here on this planet. The consequence of that is a lunar breeze or lunar wind, which we have also admitted to. So when you hear these people falsely tell you that all the lunar stuff is done in a studio, that's absolute hogwash. And that is because they are uneducated into the actual conditions on the moon. The waving of the flag had to do with the lunar wind and not with any kind of studio. And secondly, we have now admitted to water being quite normal on the moon. In 1971, we already admitted that our instrumentation recorded water geysers like Old Faithful in Yellowstone spraying out of the lunar surface for 14 hours. We didn't talk about lunar water again until 2006, nearly 35 years later, in which we are just getting the same information rehashed. So now, what's the next factor in this? We have discovered areas which are called Goldilocks zones. And here's the report. Scientists discovered 200 Goldilocks zones on the moon where astronauts can survive. The Goldilocks zone has the average temperature constant of 63 degrees Fahrenheit. It does not fluctuate up and down. So you have now 63 degree Fahrenheit, which is probably warmer than in some places right now where we're living. I know it's a little cool here on the West Coast. We have water, we have atmosphere, we have lunar wind, we have gravity. I mean, we have life on this planet even under more hostile conditions of that. Why would you not have it on the moon? The last portion of this is we have recently done a complete, well, we did it earlier with the military satellite Clementine, which did a radar and LiDAR sweep of the entire moon in order to record every nook and cranny, because we want to know how visible our own bases on the moon are, and also the extraterrestrial bases on the moon. And so when Buzz Aldrin supposedly made the statement that we've been warned away from the moon, that is not by the extraterrestrials, because the moon is considered the domain of the Earth. We ourselves, our own people, have warned the astronauts away, because that would expose the fact that Project Horizon, which was developed in the mid-50s and was supposed to be in full activation by 1967, was the establishment of lunar bases. And so and there has been much talk. The book Alternative 3 talks about lunar bases. It also talks about the labor that has been involuntarily recruited in order to produce these bases. And I think that we can see very clearly that there is activity on the moon. If you have a telescope, you can see it for yourself. We have noticed that there were what do I call it, in the crater Archimedes, that they were 3 objects that were from almost crater rim to crater rim in length, and that was nearly 30 miles. So these crafts were at least 20 miles long. This is nothing that we ourselves can possibly construct. In fact, we have a Lunar Orbiter 4 picture here, and that shows a device that
I'm not seeing the picture.
All right, let's see what happened here. We'll click on the button again. There we go. And there is a cigar-shaped ship parked next to the crater. And you can see that very clearly by where the sun is coming from and where the shadow is being cast. And if you look here at the catalog pictures that come from NASA that we acquired first generation in the late 1970s, one of the only few people to have them, you can see the haze on the lunar surface, and you can see also the fact that they have photographed UFOs around the moon as well. And in fact, the very famous picture that's on the cover of our book, We Discovered Alien Bases on the Moon 2, the one in the corner here, shows the UFO hovering above the Apollo 11 astronaut. So the moon is a much more active place than we want to give it credit for. And of course, not too many people spend a lot of time looking at the moon anymore. You know, amateurs astronomers have their own little private telescopes, and they look at things. And I knew one fellow was an aerospace engineer that looked at and recorded through his telescope. He set it up on the television optically, and then recorded on the telescope what he had seen on the moon. And you can see moving devices both above the lunar surface and on the lunar surface and what have you. And so, you know, I have a plethora of lunar information that basically tells people that as we once mentioned before, George Adamski went into space in 1955 when he was invited aboard one of these ships, and he described the Earth from orbit. Now, mind you, we didn't go into space ourselves until '61 with the Mercury project, and He described space. He described the firefly effect nearly 10 years before John Glenn did that in May of 1963. He described orbiting the moon and described the different colors of being brown and green in certain areas depending upon the mixture of water and lunar atmosphere. And if you look at the latest picture of the moon that is for the first time shown to the people that is in color, it shows exactly the same thing, whereas we're accustomed to just seeing the black and white and the gray. That's not how the moon looks like in reality.
Wow. Well, I got to see that. Now, them pictures I haven't seen. I got to see that. So, you know, I've looked at the moon. I mean, I'm fascinated by the moon, so I like to get a telescope and stare at the moon when I can. And one night, I did see, you know, a bunch of like little white lights, like craft coming out of literally coming out of a crater. It was almost, I mean, I don't know. It looked like a bunch of, like when you see a bunch of moths flying out of a bush or something, but it was on the moon, and they were coming out of a crater, and they took right off and went right into space, like a whole fleet of them.
I've seen that as well from the moon, and a lot of the pictures that George Adamski took as well of these crafts. He took through a 6-inch telescope in the 1950s of these crafts out in our atmosphere and also orbiting the moon. And the one photo I was looking for, I have in my notebook here. A few people have this. I think we're one of the only few. This picture is taken in the 1930s by Mount Wilson Observatory. And you can see what is called Cassendi Crater, or Greater Cassendi, because there's a big one and a small one. You can see the tubular constructions that are running along the bottom of the crater, making 90-degree turns, proceeding through the crater rim and out the other side. And the astronomers said that they watched over a number of years the construction of these type of man-made constructions over a period of time being assembled. And so, and here's another article that said already from as early as 1871, 40 members of England's Astronomical Society reported seeing at various shaped light patterns on the moon, including a 50-mile wide opaque object, great white domes, long bridge-like structures. In 1958, Russian scientists saw a huge glowing oval-shaped form. The sightings are unexplainable. And so these are just, this is just a tad of the information that we made available in our book, Alien Bases on the Moon 2, which the first one came out, my father and I worked on, and that was in 81, and then I did an upgrade to and additions to in 1997. And it still continues to be in demand till today. In fact, I have orders for 4 of them sitting here on my desk that I have to process. So the moon is an active place. But more importantly, it shows us that there is a commonality in how life assembles and progresses. And that doesn't make any, there is no difference between whether it happens here on Earth, the moon, Mars, or any other celestial body. Life is scattered indiscriminately throughout the cosmos. So in other words, as we talked earlier, human beings and the cows, for that matter, whether they are exactly the same or not, all these animals are spread throughout the entire cosmos. Why would I go and drive to Los Angeles to get a Slurpee when there's a 7-Eleven half a mile down the street from me?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Unless you just want to go for a ride.
Yeah, for what, 100 light years, yeah.
Yeah, so the moon then is livable, and so then I would ask these people who ordered them not to come back. I mean, I'm not. I guess I'm not trying to go there, but are we talking about like the Nazis? There's a lot of talk that the Nazis had bases on the moon.
No, that is complete misinformation. Okay. And in fact, a very well-known author in this field by the name of Timothy Good, who produced a number of excellent books, and I know him personally for, almost, since the 1960s. And he says the same thing. There is a common fantasy that is being pushed by certain individuals in this field that these UFOs are not real, but they are Nazi constructions. Well, let's make one thing clear. When you go back into the photographic archives of Europe, we have photographs as early as 1918 of these saucer-shaped ships over the European theater. Now, the Nazis didn't come into power until 1933. They didn't get Peenemünde and the V1 and V2 projects going to 39. So at least over 20 years of these sightings occurred before the Nazis even came along. So it has nothing to do with the Nazis. Did the Nazis observe these craft? Oh, yes. And so did our own military personnel who were running bombing missions during the night and day, depending on which ally you were, the British or the Americans, and describing Foo Fighters traveling along their bombing squadrons and seeing these craft. And I think the Germans did the same things the Japanese did in recent times. They saw something, they couldn't explain it, so they tried to duplicate it. And there are a couple of YouTube videos showing these, what we call the, oh God, I can't say the name anymore, but basically the Bell machine that looks a little bit like a flying saucer, but when you look at it closely, it does not resemble the other ones intimately. And also, they were unsuccessful in the ability to fly them. They flew a few hundred yards and then crashed because they did not have the propulsion system. They used a series of rotors underneath the craft like a helicopter, and it was not successful. So while the Germans tried, so did we for that matter. We tried to emulate what we saw, and not until we retrieved crash technology did we become more successful. And I think we have used that technology. Well, I mean, the record is clear. Night vision goggles, micro technology, computer technology, all these things have been downstreamed from recovered, re-engineered craft.
I have some night vision, and I'll tell you what, they are really good, and I see all kinds of weird stuff. I don't see wars going on up there like some people report, but I do see things, like I see crafts out there. Look, I'm going to say crafts was two side by side, and it's like they're racing, you know? It's like they're, just chilling, having fun out there is what it looks like.
As I mentioned before, I have seen that both in my civilian life and also in my professional life. Once again, some of my colleagues, they know of my, shall we say, extracurricular activities that I no longer have to keep suppressed, that I'm now retired. But they described to me coming across and on the midnight flights out of Hawaii to the mainland, of seeing these crafts coming in formation, circling each other clockwise, counterclockwise, then starbursting in different directions. I have seen that up here in the local mountains as well on some weekend trips when we go out to the areas where George Adamski used to have his property and set up night viewing conditions. And we will be holding a UFO symposium, an Adamski symposium on November 4th at the old Palomar Gardens Adamski property, which now is called the Oak Knoll Campground. You'll find the link on my website. The website for us is Adamski Foundation, one word, .com, and you'll see there's a link there to Oak Knoll. So we're hoping to put that together and give the public a little more exposure. But yes, you can see them. First of all, you'll be told it's a satellite. But if you look it up, you will see that the information provided to us is that it takes roughly between 2 and 3 minutes for a satellite to cross horizon. When you look up and you see something that's traveling across the night sky that crosses it in 40 seconds, you know it's not a satellite. It's simply the satellites do not have the ability to accelerate to that rate and stay in a synchronized orbit.
And especially when they stop dead on a dime and then go the other way. You know,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, those satellites doing that, I think it would destroy itself if it stopped that fast. So yeah, I mean, believe me, I don't stare at the phone when I love going outside and checking out the night sky. As a matter of fact, later this year, I plan on going visiting a desert somewhere and really, taking a good look out there. I'm fascinated by it. I know we're not alone. I know there's craft up there. I've witnessed craft. I know I've not wrestled aliens or blue chickens or any of that stuff, but I've seen the crafts, and I know they're not ours. They just couldn't be.
That's right. And my suggestion is that you take a little look ahead on the astronomic calendar so that when you go out there into the desert to get yourself a viewing condition that is less light polluted, that you do it when there is no moon, because then you have the full effect of the Milky Way and the stars in your night sky without being washed out by the lunar reflection.
Yeah, and so now going back to the moon, because I'm still just puzzled on this as far as who these people are who are up there. I mean, they're us, but like what era of us, and what are they going to do? Like the Chinese now are starting to take a lot of interest in the moon. I mean, is there some kind of agreement between governments and whoever these people are up there?
Well, as the late Dr. Carl Sagan said, the moon is the perfect observation platform to see what's going on Earth. Also, unfortunately, it becomes an excellent platform in order to experiment with certain type of weaponization. The entire Star Wars concept was proposed not as our protection from missile defenses, but our ability to project our will upon nations on this planet. Because whoever controls space then will control what goes on this world. Countries become irrelevant, governments become irrelevant. Whoever has the greatest technology then becomes the master keeper. And so that technology was supposed to be pointed at the Earth, but also it was supposed to be revolvable to point into space in order to try to deter UFOs from coming to this planet, because once again, we don't want them to influence our population to demand change, which we are deserved. So I think we have used the moon as a new platform. There was a book that came out called Alternative 3 that was developed into a documentary in Britain, and when it came out, it created the same kind of panic that the War of the Worlds did with Orson Welles, and immediately the next day, this broadcasting stations had to say, oh, this wasn't true, or this was not a real documentary, blah, blah, blah. But Alternative 3, which was denied distribution in this country, I got my copy from Australia, describes the development of lunar bases by our own military institutions, and also, like we talked about Project Horizon, that they had developed a program in order to get this whole thing going. So when our astronauts that were part of NASA were also high commissioned military officers and test pilots, when they got to the moon and found out that this was not the first step for mankind, that we had already been there before, they became highly disillusioned. I think Neil Armstrong was a perfect example of that. He became very quiet and introverted, and removed himself to a great deal from what was going on, and eventually went on to do archaeological investigations in Ecuador and other places like that. But we are using the moon, and Alternative 3 also accuses the factions that built these bases for involuntarily recruiting, or lack of a better word, abducting the labor force and transporting them so they can do the work on the construction of building these bases. Whether all of this is true or not, well, I'll leave that to others to research and determine for themselves. But I firmly believe and have observed activity on the moon, and some of it which I believe is ours, and I have NASA pictures that show the vehicles moving along the lunar surface, leaving tracks, and I think to a large degree that is us. And then, of course, we have pictures of them flying around the moon and in lunar areas. When you look here at the back side of the moon, not the dark side, because most people don't understand that the back side of the moon is lit 2 weeks out of the month and dark 2 weeks out of the other 2 weeks out of the month. But this was an orbit And this is a picture by looking, let me see, this is Apollo 12. And this is an orbit on the backside of the moon, which was totally dark at that time. And you can see in the bottom corner an illuminating device that lights up the whole topography for miles and miles. Now, whether that's a UFO or whether that's a space base, that's yet to be determined. But whatever it is artificial. There's no doubt about that. And so consequently, I think that we have put Project Horizon into operation. And there are some people that I remember having a sit down with John Lear. He and I flew together Lockheed L-1011s, wide bodies, for a certain amount of time. And even though I don't agree with all of John's hypotheses, I had to respect him for some things. And unfortunately, John would go wherever the latest accusation would be. So for a while, I remember in the 90s, he joined the group that said, oh, yeah, we didn't go to the moon. It was all faked. So I said, John, I will see you at the UFO conference in Laughlin, and I will bring along my first generation Hasselblad 15 by 11 glossies from NASA, and you can look at that, and then you tell me what you think. And after he looked at about a dozen of them, he said, there's no way this can be faked. We obviously went to the moon. I said, yeah, this is only a few of 8,000 pictures and motion picture footage that we took of going to the moon and the LEM landing. And now we have Mount Palomar, 200-inch observatory pictures of the landing site at Tranquility Base, in which the old equipment is sitting there on the surface. So these people that would love to manipulate the conspiracy theory simply because when they asked Stanley Kubrick after the development of the movie 2001, did he think it would be possible to emulate the lunar experience, he said, yeah, probably. But he didn't say he did it, and he didn't say that it was done. And so these people run rampant in order to try to make you believe. And once again, they don't talk about the gravity and the air and the motion and the water and everything else, because they themselves have not investigated it thoroughly enough. So what do? They make up fantasies and assumptions based upon their ignorance. And that is the UFO field in a nutshell.
So then I wonder what technology that these keepers of the moon used to have gotten to the moon. I can't imagine they were going up on rockets like we do.
I think originally, we did use some rockets originally. This was probably in the late 50s or early 60s. There was talk about some Saturn launching facilities located in the Indian Ocean, so that by the time that the rocket reached orbital phase, it was way above what people would be expecting to see, 10,000 miles downrange in the United States. It had already reached its apex, and so that it was not noticed. And it was also sits on the equatorial plane, so to speak, which makes it for better launch consistency as well. And as far as then the development of what we call UFOs, now they want to call them UAPs because they're hoping by redesignating it that they will look chic and modern, and more importantly, that the newer generations will not recognize what UFO was and they will accept UAP. This is also, in my belief, an attempt to distort the subject, but that's my opinion. However, I would say 65% of what is viewed today is our own research and development craft. So we went from U-2s at Skunk Works, SR-71s, the predecessor to SR-71, which was, I think, 2 or 3 only built and flown. And then we went to the Aurora, and we had atomic, and we experimented with atomic-powered craft, but these were detrimental to the existence of the pilots. They all got radiation poisoning, and many of them died because of that. So I think we have finally come around. By the mid-'60s, I think we had finally come around to developing enough of this, what we call free energy device or electromagnetic device, to get us to the moon. Maybe not enough to go to the other planets, but at least to the moon. And I think we have been shuttling back and forth, and with 65% of the sightings being our own stuff, our own craft, drones, and other remote control devices. Anything that's delta winged or triangular is our device. It is not extraterrestrial. An extraterrestrial device, in order to be able to travel the distances between the stars, has to be elliptical shaped or shaped like a cigar, because as it accelerates to the speed of light and then faster than that, any appendages or anything sticking out would not survive the acceleration process, nor the impact process of meteorites or particles or whatever. So, we have to understand clearly what is our stuff and what isn't our stuff. And so anything with landing pods, long extended legs or appendages sticking out, this is all our type of craft.
So then would it be possible that they create their own, I don't know, gravitational bubble or something that...
Yes. The field that operates, the electromagnetic field, runs through a north-south pole. So basically, if you look at if you look at a diagram of the planets or Earth, you see the magnetic field that circles from the north to the south and vice versa, and it encompasses around the planet. And this electromagnetic field sends out waves of energy which are traveling at twice the speed of light. And so, like putting yourself into a current in the ocean, you then end up traveling along the ocean at the speed of the current because it's carrying you along. And so we have been able to, and this field produces a gravitational, for the lack of a better word, force field around the craft. That's why the craft, when it's surrounded by this field at a full energy setting, it looks like a glowing, pearlescent, luminescent object of multi-colors at particular times, depending upon its reaction with the atmosphere. There's some excellent pictures from China of one of these craft that is kind of a yellowish orange. And anyway, it produces a gravitational field so that there's always one gravity pulled towards the floor. So we know in airplanes that we don't have this system. So consequently, if you take an airplane and you tilt it, then the gravity starts pulling also down from the side, and so you get that sensation of turn and pull. But in one of these craft, there's always 1g gravity floor to ceiling. So it doesn't make any difference whether the craft is on its side, upside down, or any other position. That 1g gravity is pulling towards the floor. So the people inside this craft are always experiencing the comfort of that one gravitational pull towards the floor. And so as this craft accelerates and the field becomes larger and larger around it, it protects the craft and from particles and meteorite and dust and all the other materials that are in space. And it also creates its own gravitational field in which there's total comfort within this field. And this is what they find so strange about our technology, is whether we have progress from Skylab, which is in the 70s, the International Space Station, on all of this, and we put people in detrimental physical conditions of being in a non-gravity space environment too long, when it's very easy to produce a gravitational field by rotating the vehicle or the base. And so, like you saw in the movie 2001, where the space station is circular, like a wheel within the wheel, and then the spinning of that causes the gravity, so that on the outside flange, the people were walking around and conducting their business in a comfortable position. And so we have basically two things. We have one space system, a space organization that is doing the public PR side of this, which is very slow on purpose because they don't want us to get too fast there. That's why we didn't go back to the moon, because we shot that down because we didn't want to get exposed. And now, as you mentioned, other countries are becoming more attuned to space exploration. Sooner or later, there will be exposure to certain things. When the second NASA release of moon water was in 2006, they tried to backpedal and deny it. And then, of course, the Chinese and the Indians went up there with their probe devices and also released the fact there was water. So we were actually forced, so we didn't look like fools, in order to and concur with that. And I think that until we are basically, for lack of a better word, put our backs against the wall so that it has to be acknowledged, it's not going to be. They didn't spend that much money, time, and technology to establish things that they were going to expose so easily.
And what type of speeds would you say these crafts are moving at? And in our atmosphere, it's probably one thing, but when they leave the atmosphere of Earth, the speeds are much different.
Yeah, they've been tracked in the atmosphere of the Earth, in excess of 20,000 miles an hour. And in space, of course, then we are free of all the influences of the planetary geophysics, and then can basically, like the current in the ocean or the current in the stream that runs along the mountain brook, it carries us at the speed that it is going, and that speed can be as high as twice the speed of light.
Oh,
and
wow.
so, and there is talk, and I have to admit that there is talk that there are speeds that are even faster than that. Although, as far as my contacts and information is concerned, our explanation and comprehension of wormholes and black holes, we don't understand at all what we're talking about. These are not used for transportation. The solar system or the universe is not warped. We come up with all kinds of silly theories and suppositions. There's no such thing as time travel. That is a fantasy. And basically we have to stop substituting science fiction, which appeals to our egos, to the actuality of science fact. And until we go out into space in greater numbers like we were supposed to, John Kennedy tried desperately to make that happen so that it would awaken us, and we would be able to join the communities that are out there and move forward in a significant way. We need to do that. And what we have told the people or insinuated to the people that this is wasted money, because you see so many times people say, oh, we've got so many problems here on Earth and poverty and blah, 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 blah. Remember, these conditions are self-perpetuated. And so, the countries that supposedly can't afford food and clean water and things like that somehow miraculously get the funds for AK-47s and tanks and helicopters and everything else. So this is a matter of willpower and the desire to change. But to travel space at faster speeds than the speed of magnetism can certainly be possible. So therefore, when you look at the closer systems like Alpha Centauri and Wolf 359 and the Tau Ceti and things like that are anywhere from 4 to 15 light years away, if you can accelerate and travel at fast speeds, then reaching those distances are not the unfathomable projection that we like to tell people. And I think we do that on purpose. We do not focus on the planets in our system because we have told the people that it's inhospitable and that's just the way it is. Yet most people, when you ask them, do you believe your government? No. Do you believe the stuff that you're being told? No. Then why do you believe what is being told to you from a single agency about space where you have no method of confirmation? And then they look at you dumbfounded.
Yeah, exactly. And so now I've got a few questions from the chat here. David wants me to ask you about crop circles.
Okay. Well, I think that I think everybody who has spent a little time looking at these things realizes that there is a fair number of them that have been admittedly faked, where they have been constructed and contrived by people, in the UK and other places who thought it would be good fun to play on the lack of information and knowledge by people. I think to some degree we have the fakers. I think the other part of that is that we also have orbital weapons and technology, whether it's microwave, particle beam, and things like that, in which we also experiment on how that affects the surface of the planet. And so I think that we are also using that technology to cause a little mystification as well. It serves a two-pronged purpose, like we talked about with many other things as well.
Yeah.
As far as whether they are significant messages, then I have this question. Nobody's been able to translate what these symbols actually signify. So if I'm going to leave you a message, of what value is the message if you can't read it and can't figure out what it says?
That's a good point. What about the capsule we apparently sent out there? Had, I guess, man, woman, some kind of graphs or what have you.
Oh, you're talking about Voyager, which had the gold plate on it.
That's it, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm sure they'll be able to make heads or tails out of that. I mean, it's obviously something that, it's not natural, but they know we're here anyways. So.
Well, and then why send a message if you don't think anybody's going to read it? They keep telling you there's no life out there, then why would you bother?
Oh, yeah, exactly. So now I got another question here from a listener, and you're a pilot, so I think this is a perfect question for you. And I don't agree with this personally, but people keep throwing it up, so I'll ask. Flat Earth. Is the Earth flat?
No. I mean, when you first of all, look at all the photographs of the planet. And
well, they say those photographs are fake, is what they'll tell you.
Okay, all right. So let's say the photographs are fake. Why is it then, when you are mathematically calculating the distance from one point to another, it's not a straight line? If you are calculating the route between London and Los Angeles, the line is elliptical. And it's elliptical because the surface upon which it's traveling is round. Then on top of it, the moon is round. You take out your telescope and you look at the other planets, they're round. The sun is round. I mean, the idea that the Earth is flat is I mean, this is 14th century stuff. I thought we had long passed that. And so, and the idea that all the pictures are now fake, where is somebody's proof? How easy it is to make that accusation. Well, it's fake. All right, so I asked them, how is it fake? And they said, well, it's computer and Photoshop. I said, wait a minute. These pictures were taken decades before any of that existed. How is it faked? And so they can't come up with the answer because they have grown up in an age where they are not cognizant of what had happened before. I mean, if you go out there and you watch a Saturn V take off and the roar of those engines and the thousands of people there who witnessed it, there's no way in the hell that's fake. Secondly, the telescopes from both the professional and amateur telescopes around the world were able to watch and track Apollo to the moon. How is that fake? And I keep telling these people and asking this question, and then they tell me, well, it went to the moon, but now it was unmanned. I mean, every single excuse is being floated in order to desperately hold on to old ideas or new ideas that are purposely manufactured in order to confuse everybody.
Yeah.
But no, the Earth isn't flat, and we're not the center of the universe. Copernicus already talked about that. And And so, I mean,
Yeah.
and the very truth that in order to measure a distance between one place and another is not a straight line. It is always an ellipse, which means the surface upon which you're traveling is round. I mean, this isn't rocket science.
All right, and I've had folks come on and tell me everything. I'd say, well, what about airplanes? You look out the window. Oh, well, the windows are designed to make it look that way. Well, what about the pitch? Taking pictures out. People have put cameras on balloons and sent them up. And you can see the curvature. They say, oh, well, the lenses on the cameras are made to make it look like that. So you really can't win.
Well, I remember flying across the North Pole because the routes to China are out of the eastern seaboard, up over Newfoundland, across the North Pole, down over Siberia, into Mongolia, and then into China. That's how you get to Beijing and Shanghai in most circumstances. And as you fly over the North Pole, it is clearly evidence you can see the curvature of the Earth. And so if the windows were designed to falsely give you that impression, then that false impression would be there 100% of the time, and it's not the case. Plus, you can take your own cameras and take pictures of it. And I've seen the deterioration of the ice flows and all of southern Greenland now free of ice, and the changes to the planetary conditions firsthand. So I would take objection to anybody who said that the Earth is flat. Prove it.
And I would agree. And I used to be really harsh when the whole flat Earth thing come up. I'd get irate about it, but now I just kind of, hey, I'll ask the questions. I mean, they obviously seen something that's convinced them, and I personally know. I mean, I've looked through telescopes, and and I think there's enough evidence outside of that. But to each their own. I think there's even a guy who was the head of all that who tried to launch himself up to prove that the Earth was flat, and I think the first time he got hurt really bad, the second time he killed himself. So I hope it was worth it. So
yeah.
All right. So another question here quickly. Somebody asked about Roswell. What's your thoughts on the Roswell crash?
Yes, the Roswell crash was an actual event. It was by no means the only event. If you do a little research, there's the crash in Cape Girardeau, which I believe is in Missouri, that happened in 1941. There's also circumstances where these craft have had mechanical failures and have landed successfully or also crashed in other areas, such as Mexico and South America. And there is talk that the 1908 Siberian so-called meteorite was an actual UFO crash, because the meteorite did not impact. It exploded. It left no crater. It left no meteoric debris. And so, but anyway, Roswell was these crafts. They were, in that particular time, in the summertime, there are immense electrical storms. And for some reason, the electrical storm generated enough power in order to negatively impact the craft, which also cracked open a portion of it, which allowed for explosive pressurization, what we call explosive decompression, same thing that you would have in an airplane. If you were up at altitude and the port window blew out, you would have explosive decompression inside. So the combination of electrocution and explosive decompression caused the failure of this craft and also the death of the occupants. There are varying stories that there were either 4 or 5 occupants, of which 3 of them were dead and the other 2 were partially alive, but they were killed by the military, were shot by their rifles. So there were no living aliens that were taken away from Roswell. They were all dead bodies. And they all resembled human beings to a certain extent, shorter, about 4 feet tall. And also you have to remember that all of these craft carry 2 devices. One is a robot, and the other one are androids. And so the android is an upgrade of their robotics. So for a number of years, up until perhaps 20 years ago, they were a combination of the 2. Now, to a certain degree, they're mostly androids. The androids are recognizable because of the fact that they only have 4 fingers. And And so there were two impacts. There was the initial impact zone, and the craft skipped. If you read Major Coruscant's book, The Day After Roswell, or Jesse Marcel's book, who was the major in charge of the article that was originally released from Roswell, in which he was later made to falsely recant as a weather balloon. And he describes that in his book as well. I've got both his son's book and Major Marcel's book. And so then the craft skipped and then finally came to rest a number of miles from the original impact site. And then the military, of course, went there, quadrant off the area, and collected both the craft. To some degree, they tried to tell you that it was just debris, which is not true. There was debris from the initial skip. And then mostly in an entire craft, about 80% probably complete or better. That was the final recovery that was downwind of the skip point. And then that was all transported, the debris collected and flown out through Fort Bliss or Dallas Fort Worth, and then on to Wright Pat. And so that material was confirmed. I mean, that they have tried desperately to give you all kinds of falsehoods. They told you that the bodies were also mistaken parachute jump dummies, what we call halo, high altitude, low release, and until somebody pointed out that those dummies were not invented until almost 10 years after the Roswell event. So, and then of course you had that big press conference, I believe it was in the 90s, in which the colonel at the Pentagon, we've put this finally to rest, and we'll give you the same excuses we gave you before, but now you're supposed to believe it more than you did before, and so anyone who knew anything about what was going on there know that was actual, but not the only one. There were several other recovered craft, one from White Sands, New Mexico, that was recovered intact. And then there's talk about Aztec, New Mexico. So there were several crafts. So the next question people ask is, well, if they're so technologically advanced, then why did they have technical difficulties or mechanical difficulties? Why did they crash? Well, my God, you travel 1 million miles through space. You don't think there's any wear and tear on the device? Of course. Things are going to happen. Not anything. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And so, consequently, we have received some, as Dr. Hermann Oberth said, who was the father of German rocketry and was recruited, Operation Paperclip, with Werner von Braun and the rest of them into White Sands for the rocketry missile program, which was the progression from the V1 and V2, that they asked him to, what do you attribute all the technological advance in the last 50 years? And he said, we've been helped. And they asked him, who helped us? And he pointed up in the sky and said, our friends up there. So
yeah, and to think that the military wouldn't know the difference between a weather balloon and something else that's crashed is kind of nuts to me. So when they made the announcement that a UFO had crashed, that was the right call.
Yeah, it was the right call. And Project Mongol, which was the weather project, was a fair number of miles away from there. And I cannot imagine that the military did not communicate with each other when they were releasing these devices, because the last thing you would want is something to be misidentified and then shot down. It would totally negate the whole reason for the project. So you've got to know that when they were getting ready to release these devices, they were going to let their senior people know downstream the actual report was correct, and they backpedaled like crazy in order to try to cover it back up.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, I could go several more hours with you, but we are about out of time, so I want to give you the floor to get out anything else that you like, and please tell people where they can go to view these photos more. And wow, thank you for all the information. I really enjoy talking to you. You really know what you're doing and what you're talking about.
Thank you, Mike. I always appreciate being on your show, and I appreciate your your non-biased abilities to question and to bring subject matters up so that there can be an intelligent discussion. For the people that are interested, I have probably 6 or 7 YouTube videos on the YouTube. The best thing to do is to type my name, Glenn Steckling, into the YouTube search. Somehow it also got listed under Glenn Steckling and then Adamski added afterwards. But either one of those will bring you into the YouTube forum. I did a 3-hour MUFON show, and that's on there, including my father on Japanese national television. There's a clip and many other interviews available there. And a lot of the pictures can be viewed there because some of the interviewers had Zoom, and we were able to share screen, and therefore instead of holding something up in front of the camera, it makes it difficult for you to see. You'll get a better view of the photographs that way. Also, if you're interested in the book, Alien Bases on the Moon 2, you can find that under Adamski Foundation, oneword.com on the materials page. We are also on abe.com, which is a Canadian book distributor, sort of like Amazon. We're on Amazon and also eBay. You will find our books, Behind the Flying Saucer Mystery, Inside the Spaceships. All our materials are there. And we will be trying to stay to the schedule of having this UFO symposium out here in the Southern California, up at the Mount Palomar area on November 4th. So anybody with questions are welcome to contact me through the foundation email, which is listed on the front page. So I hope that people got some information that they found, at least to some degree, that will cause them to question a few things and maybe cause them to go out and take a look if they want to find supporting evidence for that. And I will continue to do the work that I've done for a number of the last 30 years and try to get this book out, which is a major stumbling block for me. The first half of it is the history of my family's involvement from the beginning until now in the UFO field, and also then the second half has to do with the major issues that are in the UFO field. Has UFO history been compromised? The illusion of disclosure, and so many other different things. So hopefully that book I'm sure it will cause a stink, because there are many who don't want this kind of information to come out to challenge their projections. But, like I said, every so often you got to shake the tree.
That's it. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for being here. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And keep up the great work, and we've got to do this again soon.
You bet. Okay,
all
anytime.
Right.
You let me know.
Yes, sir. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, folks, there he goes, Glenn Steckling, and I'll tell you, just a wealth of information. 30 years he's been doing this, and there's a lot of these guys. I remember Stanton Freeman. A lot of these guys, John Lear, and so many of them. Dr. Roger Lear. Just so many of them who are not with us. We still got great guys like Glenn, who are still pumping it out in this field and giving us as much truth as they can uncover. Folks, I will be live tomorrow night, but now tomorrow night I will be live on the VARA network and Rumble. I would appreciate it big time if you would go over to Rumble and subscribe to my channel over there as well. And just like when I'm on Rumble, I ask people there to come over here and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to spread it around right now. Eventually we'll get them all at one time, but that's just not happening right yet. I'm going to be making a move soon here to a better spot, and going to have a studio set up even better, and better equipment at that. That's coming in the near future here, and then I will have all the works bells and whistles. But right now, just doing it as the best I can. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. I appreciate your support, your kind words, and your time. And so I'll be back with you again tomorrow night, right here on the VARA network and again on Rumble. So keep your eyes posted to the sky, because you never know what you might see. And keep your ears posted to this broadcast, because you just never know what you might learn. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Sunday evening.